Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the next webinar in my series looking at different aspects of public speaking. So in this webinar series, our big goal is to get you from, I have an idea and I want to give a talk, to getting on stage and giving your talk. Ooh. So today, what we're going to focus on is we're going to look at writing your talk. Last week, we talked about what it's like to research different places to speak, and we looked at a workflow for building out abstracts. Today, we're assuming that you're a little bit further in your journey. So we're saying, well, we think that by the time you're worried about this, you've probably written your abstract, you've probably submitted it, and you've probably gotten that accepted someplace. So now you've got to actually go ahead and write your talk. How scary. Writing an abstract was a little bit of work, but really writing an abstract was just a paragraph or two. This is writing a full talk. Again, to give you a little bit of background about myself, if you're just joining us, my name's Jessica Rose. I've been a public speaker really focused on technology for maybe 5-6 years now. I do a lot of one-on-one work with people who want to get into public speaking. So I thought I'd go ahead and do a webinar series just in case people wanted to self-serve this and save me a little bit of time. A little bit of housekeeping as we start. If you're joining us live in the webinar, right about this side of the screen, you should have a little chat box. Feel free to say hello, feel free to chat to other people. But if you have any questions that you really want answered, write down here at the bottom of your screen, there should be a tab for asking a question, saying ask a question. If you have a question that you really want to make sure I answer, ask it down there and we'll cover that at the end of the talk. If you're not watching this live, if you're watching a replay on Crowdcast, or if you're watching this on YouTube and you want to ask me a question, find me at Twitter on @JesslynRose, and we'll put the contact details at the end as well. So you're sitting down, you've got your abstract in front of you, and you're going to write your talk. There's a couple of things you want to keep in mind. So if you've gotten this talk accepted, try and remember how long this talk is. If you've got a 10-minute talk or a 5-minute lightning talk, trying to give me the history of the Roman Empire might be a really challenging one. Make sure that you're writing your talk to fit the scope of how much time you have available. Also, as you write your talk, try and keep the setting in mind. If you're speaking at like a meetup or a small casual event, writing something that's more informal, more loose may fit the event much better. If you're at a very, very formal industry talk, or if you're at an academic conference, you may want to write a talk that's better cited, that's really backed up with more links, backed up with more, oh, and this expert says. So the tone you're going to take as you write your talk is going to be very different depending on the setting. And really, the rest of these things are going to be all about what your audience needs. As a public speaker, that's what you're here for. This is all about, what does your audience need to learn from you? What are you sharing with them through this talk? Think about the audience size. Are you going to have an intimate 1-to-1, 1-to-12 conversation with 700 people? How are you going to do that? If you're giving a technical talk, or if you're talking about something that involves a level of skill, think about what the audience skill level is likely to be. If you're going to be telling somebody who's an expert in their field a really 101, a really introductory level look at something, is that still going to be valuable? If you're giving an advanced look at something, how are you going to accommodate people who are just now learning about your topic? And one thing that I think public speakers really overlook a lot is to keep in mind audience language skills. If you're a native English speaker and you're giving your talk in a country where English isn't the first language, try and make sure that you're making it accessible. Speak slowly, speak clearly, put things on the slides that sort of back up what you're saying out loud. If I'm speaking someplace where English isn't the native language, I'm going to put a lot more text on my slides. But really, the one thing that you want to be coming back to again and again as you write your talk is, who is your audience? What do they need from you? Put yourself in their situation. Say, you know what, we're going to be talking about this topic. I feel like I've got a good grasp on it, but my audience, are they new to this topic? Have they experienced it before? What do they care about? If I'm speaking to students, they probably care about knowing enough about this topic to write about it, to pass their exams, or to get a job in this field. If I'm talking to experts, what do they need to know? As you write your talk, continually come back and ask yourself, what do these people need from me out of this talk? And one thing I find is really exciting is the idea of narrative design. The same way somebody writing a book or writing a short story wants to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and they want to have drama, they want to have excitement. You probably can't get a murder mystery romance into your talk, but you want to have sort of the aspects of narrative design involved in that. Have a think about what you're saying, why you're saying it, and how you're structuring it. There's a lot of fantastic resources out there about narrative design, and reading some of these might be a really fun way to sort of dive a little bit deeper into how you're writing your talk. In this webinar, I'm going to show you how I write my talks. Don't worry if your style may be different. I really enjoy writing small notes to myself and then fleshing that out. I've met people who write their entire talk word for word. It's intimidating and terrifying and beautiful. I could never be able to do it. I'm going to show you the way I do it. If you've got a different way, like give me a message later or give me a message now and tell me about how you do it. I'd be really interested in maybe even having a guest come and host a webinar where you all show off your workflow. I'm just going to show you mine because that's all I've got. Last week when you joined us, if you joined us last week, we collaboratively wrote an abstract. We're going to go back to that abstract and we're going to collaboratively write a little bit of the outline for a talk and get those into slides. So I'm going to show you my workflow. It'll take about 10-15 minutes. So you'll get out of this webinar maybe around half an hour total. But let me know if you have any questions and we'll cover those all at the end of the talk. We're not going to write a full talk here. We're just going to go ahead and sample how that works. So who here who's seeing this live, who was here last week? Who helped us write this? Last week when we talked about abstract writing, we decided that the hypothetical abstract we wanted to write was we wanted to write a talk about soft skills for total jerks. It had a punchy title, and the way we wrote this abstract was we went ahead and we made some bullet points for the main things we wanted to cover. And from those bullet points, we turned them into a short paragraph, a little punchy piece of prose. We're going to go a step further, and I'm going to show you how I turn those into talks. Don't worry if this looks weird. Don't worry if you don't like this. If you think this is absolutely miserable and you don't want to write your talks this way, I totally respect this. I like to start writing things with little brackets, and the brackets representing slides or a section of slides. This sounds super weird, but stick with me. So if I'm going to start writing my talk, you know how when you write a letter, you've got a little bit of padding. You say, "Dear so-and-so, it's lovely to," or if you start an email, you've got a little bit of padding. When you write a talk, you've got a little bit of padding. Here I've got title slide. Soft skills for total jerks. I already know what my first intro slide is. I know what the first little bit of my talk is. I know what it's going to be like when I walk on stage, but the first thing I'm going to say is, "Hello, I'm here to talk to you about," oh, look at the slides, "soft skills for total jerks." This is like a free win. What should I do next? I've gotten on stage. I've got my title up. What's the next thing I should probably do? And this is a real question for folks that are live. Oh, Veronica, amazing. I'm going to say who I am. Some people like to go into a very, very long, extended, "Here's who I am. Here's why I'm a knowledgeable expert. Here's why you should believe me." But if you're in this webinar, you saw my intro. I'm like, "Hi, I'm Jess. I do things. Let's go." I don't have to write all that out because I know who I am and I know what I'm going to say, probably. I'm just going to write, "Sorry, y'all, that's very small." Is that a bit better? I'm probably just going to say intro. I'm going to have 1 or 2 slides there that say, here I am, here's my title, here's my intro. What do you think I might want to tackle next? So we've got a lot of different things we can do here. And for my talks, I really like the idea of a beginning, a middle, and an end. Oh, fantastic. Liam's got a really fantastic idea of a quick intro to the subject and what I'll cover. I really love this. And for me, because I love to tell stories, Anna's suggesting an example problem. I think both of these are great. I'm going to do a quick intro to the subject with an example problem. I'm going to tell a short story. Here, a short Here I'm just going to tell a short story or an anecdote about jerks and soft skills. It doesn't have to be a true anecdote. If it is a true anecdote, you might want to leave out people's names. Not say like, oh, Bob, my old boss this one time. No. Oh, Simon, my old. Yeah, if you're going to use examples of real people, you may want to flub the details just to be nice. Or it's completely okay to make your story based on multiple different experiences. So I already know a really big part of my talk. I know I'm going to come up and I've got my title. I'm going to introduce myself. And then I'm going to give a short anecdote explaining what the problem is. From here, it might be a really good idea to come back and look at my abstract. We don't only have this paragraph, but we've also got all of the points that we mean to include. I always like to refer back to my abstract because that's the promise I made people who come to my talk. So here, I'm going to list maybe the short skills, or soft skills. And because for this hypothetical talk, we've included an anecdote, this gives us a really fantastic point to say, hey, here's this anecdote about my old boss, Bob. I don't have a former boss named Bob. All of my former bosses have been actually fairly lovely. But here we've got a really great chance to link them together. I said, well, you know what? I want to preview what we're going to be talking about. I've told a short anecdote. Here, when I say, here are the things we're going to cover, here I've got the opportunity to say, here's what Bob was missing. I've got the opportunity to wrap this into the narrative. Say, I'm talking to you about soft skills for total jerks. Hi, I'm Jess. I'm going to tell you a story about my old boss, Bob. Bob was terrible. He was rude. He didn't listen. He didn't communicate clearly. Ugh, Bob. In this talk, we're going to be talking about soft skills, and we're going to be talking about what Bob missed out on by not being aware of soft skills. Soft skills like active listening, clear communication, genuine curiosity in people. So shall we put those down as our soft skills? Ooh. Communication. Listening. The worst thing about typing where someone can see you is it's absolutely inviting you to make typos. And doing a live webinar gives you the opportunity to both mess things up as you say them and as you type them. It's very exciting, very humbling. Can we get one more soft skill that we're going to talk about? So communication, listening. Oh, Liam, nice. So Liam, for those of you who aren't in the live show, wants it to talk about giving credit where it's due or not taking credit for other people. So sharing credit appropriately. And then we had a fantastic suggestion from Hannah. And Hannah, your idea about empathy, I think that maybe for a talk like this, should empathy be the big overarching one? So we're going to talk about a couple of different soft skills, but the big thing we're looking at is empathy. So empathy is the big message here, maybe. Here are these individual skills, these things to do or not do, but what we're really giving, we really care about, the big takeaway message is empathy. And here, I'm going to go ahead and break these up a little bit. So the title slide, that's a section. The intro section, that's a section. And that's one as well. Actually, am I indenting these wrong? All of the programmers are probably cringing terribly. How about we indent things that belong to this? So we're going to list the soft skills we're going to be covering. Communication is one of them. Listening is one of them. And sharing credit appropriately. But in this abstract, we've made a promise. We say, we're going to look at soft skills and we're going to tell you how to get better at them. So here, I'm going to want to tab in again. I'm going to say, here's what communication is. Here a common problem. Here's how to get better. And this is really formulaic. So what I'm saying is these things, I might want to cover those for all of the soft skills we're talking about. It's formatted weird. And this is very, very much how I write my talks out, where I say, well, you know, in the beginning, I want to cover this and this. Here are the different aspects. Here are the different individual things that I think are important. And coming back to the abstract every time I go to write and go to edit and say, what have I, or because this is going to be your talk, what have you promised your listener? And we talked about how the most important thing to come back to again and again is what your audience needs to take away, what's valuable for your audience. So here, communication, conflict resolution, active listening are probably the things I should have included. Communication, stop. So just the same way I can't type anything when anybody's watching me, the same way you might use your notes to write a report or to write an article, here you're going to be using your abstract as the notes to pull things out of. If you've ever written anything, if you've written an article about this topic, you might want to use your article and sort of directly pull that into the new talk format. This is a really fantastic sort of way to structure your thoughts. From here, you've got a much, much scarier step. I like to move directly from an outline like this For those of you following along live, you might be a little bit suspicious now because I clearly write my webinars the same way. From here, now that I've got these things, I like to be a little bit lazy and go directly into my slide deck. We're going to do this right now. Don't worry if your slides look a little bit ugly. I don't care what your slides look like when you first start. We're going to work on slide design next week, I think. So here, I'm using Google Slides. If you're writing your own talk, you can use absolutely whatever you feel the most comfortable in. I'm using Google Slides because it's really easy to show you all in this webinar that we can edit it on the fly. But lots of people like to use Keynote. Lots of people like to use different open office things. For folks who do JavaScript, there's a really cool Reveal.js that lets you write in Markdown and CSS and style it beautifully. And actually, the webinar overall is something I've done in Reveal.js, but using slides.com, which is a very quick, very easy, very on-the-fly way to build out your slides. So we're just going to tab back and forth between these two documents to get an idea of how I like to write things. Here, I'm going to go ahead and write the same weird brackety things. I like to leave these in brackets because it makes it very difficult to accidentally leave these in. You're always going to practice your talk several times. And whenever I see a slide that has brackets on it, I know that I've probably just forgotten to do the slide properly. So here, I've got the really cool opportunity to go ahead and build this out one at a time. So the next thing I'm going to do is my intro slide. But as I work on these, once I get all of my different aspects of my talk built in, I like to go ahead and write out what I'm going to be talking about. So here's my intro slide. Okay. Mention who I am, who I work for, and why I might be a great person. I can't type it all when I'm looking at this. And this lets me go ahead and just write very messy notes about my talk. Hey, I've got this idea. Here it is. And you know what? Here, since we're talking about soft skills for total jerks, I can go ahead and write small clips of things I want to make sure to say. This is my writing style, and these notes are a mess. I'm going to wind up with these little bracketed reminders telling me what I'm doing here so that when I go back to my notes, I can see how far I've gotten. And these little bracketed notes don't necessarily correspond to individual slides. My short anecdote about my old boss, Bob, that's probably going to be several slides because, like, let's make it a funny anecdote. Why not? Here, I might want to first set the stage, say, oh, a long time ago, working someplace terrible, I had a boss, Bob, who was the worst. And here you can either go ahead and write out what you want to say word for word, although I promise that when you get on stage, you're probably not going to read it word for word. If I can beg you to do something, is never just read your talk notes. Practice a couple times and get used to it, and then just get used to saying what you intended to say for that slide. I'll go ahead and build these out, and when I'm ready to build the slides for my talk, I'm going to slowly convert these into fewer and fewer pieces of text and maybe a quick image or a couple of bullet points. I know this seems a little bit weird and this may not be the best way for you, but this is a way that I found works really well to get me thinking about my talk. Generally, it's super weird, but I'll say them to myself or I'll say, oh, well, I had this old boss. Yeah, I had this old boss, Bob, and really feel it out. And that's really a quick look at how I write my talks. Once I get that done, once I get all of my notes in, I'll just refine that and practice with my ugly notes again and again until I have a pretty good idea of what I want to say. When I was newer to speaking, I would leave very detailed speaker notes in my speaker notes section. And these days, it's terrible, I shouldn't do it, but I kind of wing it. Veronica has a fantastic question is, how do you end the talk? So the same way you want to ramp up to your talk, you may want to start to wind down. So it all depends on how you want to do things. Let's come back a little bit because that's a fantastic question. Coming back to my notes, it occurs to me that I've given you how to start a talk and not a lot of how to finish one. How do I want to wrap it up? I might want to look again at all the soft skills we mentioned. I often really like to give people a single slide to say, hey, if you want to remember one thing, or if you don't take anything else out of this talk, please, this. And have a slide that just has the most important information on it. This is really cool because people tend to take a photo of that slide and share it on social media. But when you come back and you say, just to recap, or just to review, or the big takeaway I want you to have is this, you're giving people a narrative clue. You're giving them a clue in the story that you're just about done. You can use really leading words to say, just to review what we've looked at during this talk. Here, when I hear that, I'm like, oh, this talk's almost over. I should get ready to go fight for coffee in the break, or this talk's almost over. I wonder if I got everything. So giving people context clues and saying, hey, as we're coming to the end of this talk, you can be very explicit. Well, we're almost out of time. So let's look at what we've talked about during this talk. It's a really fantastic way to also signpost other things people do. It's like, well, I don't have time to go into more detail, but I wrote an article about this. Here's the link. Veronica, thank you for that fantastic question, looking at how you want to wrap up your talk. Wrapping up your talk can be really challenging. I'm afraid I'm not fantastic at it yet, as evidenced by this very clumsy rush to the Q&A session. I'm going to go ahead and answer the live question and answers right now. Oh dear, these are fantastic. I've got a question from Alex saying, how do you prepare for being on a panel when you're not sure what the questions will be? This is fantastic. I should probably do a session on being on a panel. If I'm going to be on a panel, I'll generally look at videos, either that the person running the panel has done panels in the past. I'll see what questions they ask. Or if it's a panel like, if I was going to a panel on public speaking, which would be a bit meta, I'd probably look at videos of public speaking panels and what kinds of questions get asked. Yeah, I'd probably do a lot of Googling, do a lot of watching short videos of people that have already been on similar panels. And if possible, if I've got contact details for the person running the panel, I might shoot them a note to say, hi, I'm really excited to be on this panel with you. I'm really excited to answer your questions, but I love to prepare. Do you have any idea what kinds of things you'd like to cover? Hannah's got a fantastic question, and I think that this is going to be a hard one to answer. How do you write your talk to consistently keep your audience's attention? This is really hard. So for me personally, I like to try and tell a story and always be coming back to that one story. If I've told you a story about my old boss, Bob, it should be a story that's very easy to empathize. Almost everyone has had a jerk boss. Say, hi, I'm going to talk to you about my boss, Bob. And as you talk about the different points, say, well, coming back to this, coming back to our story, here's how this is relevant. This is only the way I've liked to do things. You're really going to have to trial and error. You're going to have to give a couple of talks and find out what works best for you and find out what works really well for your audience. Ah, fantastic. I've got a question I really like from Liam, which is how and when would you make a presentation more interactive for listeners? And saying, for example, in the webinars, we're kind of asking the live participants for examples, and we're sort of collaboratively doing things where possible. For me, I draw a lot on my background as a former teacher. So in talks, I really love to bully people and make them stand up or make them raise their hands to get a little bit of interactivity. One thing I'm going to warn is sometimes You don't want people to signal themselves out and raise their hands. If I'm giving a talk like we've written today, say, hi, I want to talk to you about my terrible boss. Who here has had a bad boss? Raise your hand. Folks who are here with their managers listening to my talk, they're putting themselves in a very dangerous situation. Terry makes a fantastic point saying geography also affects whether or not people will participate. And that's very true. So speaking around the world, I've found that American audiences are generally very compliant. I'm American myself. We love to stand up. We love to raise our hands. And even if we don't, if we get told to, we'll probably do it. Asking for a lot of interactivity from an audience in Berlin might be a little bit more of a challenge. So think about how and when. Some people who are working as developers or have a lot of code, I've seen a lot of interactive demos. Hey, go to this website. Hey, send me an SMS that does this. So think about whether or not the talk that you're looking at, the topic you're looking at, can be technically interactive. I've got another question from Liam that's really great saying, last week I talked about lightning talks to start off. Would I recommend the same structure for a 5-minute talk as a talk? And if not, what would I change? And to be honest, I often have a very similar pattern that I like to follow for either. I want to have a who, what, when, why. I want to have a, here's my intro slide, here's who I am, here's a story about what we're talking about, here's the meat of the content and the important takeaway, goodbye, go away. But if I have a 5-minute talk, I'm not going to give you a lot of bio. I'm not going to give you a lot of intro. I'm going to cut back and try and really focus on the middle bit. Focus on the meat of it, which is, we're here to talk about soft skills for total jerks. Here are the soft skills we're talking about. Here's how you can improve them. Have a nice day. So always spend the most time on your most important topics for the talk. And I've got a question from Geoff, who's just a lovely person in general, and I'm delighted to see in this webinar. How to keep track of time during your talk and the Q&A. Should that be your responsibility during the talk, or should that fall to event organizers? This is a really fantastic point, and actually something we're going to talk about in much more detail on February 1st, when this webinar series is going to look at sort of tips and tricks for the day. Keeping track of your time is really challenging for early speakers. If you've just started doing public speaking, a lot of times you're going to be nervous, and even veteran speakers are terribly nervous. When you're nervous, you tend to go very, very quickly. A lot of different slide presentation modes. If you're using Keynote, if you're using Google Slides even, you can add a big clock to the top that shows you how long has elapsed or how long you have left. A lot of times event organizers will have somebody holding up 5-minute, 10-minute things, and I always think that's really considerate. For me, I often sort of gray out and just auto-deliver my talk, waiting for it to be over. So I find that waiting for an external cue from another person can get really challenging. Time your talk when you practice it, try again and again. Almost all new speakers are going to go much faster on stage than they intended to. This is completely fine. If you're at a meetup, if you're at an internal event, if you're at an industry conference talk, nobody is going to be disappointed if you go too fast. If you have a 30-minute talk and you're done in 20, people have 10 minutes to chat and drink coffee. Never worry about running too quickly. If you run over by a couple minutes, it's probably okay as well, but it can be pretty rude. We've got a really fantastic suggestion from Tristan in the audience saying, hey, you might want to get a friend in your audience to cue you on the time. That's a really interesting way to do it. If you run over by too much, somebody's going to give you a very, very explicit get off stage cue sooner or later. It looks like we've just about wrapped up. We've kept this webinar to right around 30 minutes as I was hoping to. If any of you have any more questions, feel free to ping them in the Q&A or fuss at me on Twitter. Having a look at things, we're going to be coming right back next week. If we take a look at what we've done so far, we've gotten the skeleton for our talk. It's a little messy. And we've got sort of a process through which to refine your talk. Here's what we're going to talk about. Here's how we're going to do it. When you come back next week, if you come back next week, we're going to be talking about slide design, how to go from these kind of janky slides to something that you'd be happy showing on stage. This is going to be a messy, weird process, and I'm really excited to talk to you about that. That's going to be on Thursday, January 25th. If you come back the following week, we're going to be talking about actually delivering your talk, tips for the stage. Thank you all so much for joining me. I hope you have a fantastic time. And if any of you do go ahead and get on stage soon, come back and tell me about what you did. Tell me what you talked about. I'm going to be really excited to see whether or not this was helpful. Have a great time.